Hey everybody, welcome to today's episode of the Drone Business Show. I'm Matt Williams, your host, and I'm joined today by our very special guest, Paul Brown from 123 Drone. Paul's got a really interesting story, loads to talk about and to teach you guys and to help you learn, build and grow, which is exactly the mission that we're on in terms of trying to help people go from where they are now, help you go from where you are now to where you want to be in 5 years' time. And Paul is there, right, and beyond. So that's why it's amazing to have people like him join us on the show to tell your story and to tell the audience about how you got there. So, mate, thank you for joining us. It's a pleasure to have you here in a lovely mobile studio. I need to get me one of those as well. But no, it's lovely to have you, mate. Thank you for joining us. If you wouldn't mind, just explain to everybody listening what it is that you guys do right now, and then we'll go back into the journey as to how you got there.
Of course. So 123 Drone established about 2 years ago, although I had a previous drone business, so I rebranded 2 years ago. So it was previously called 360 Dragonfly, rebranded, and primarily we carry out construction progress reports for clients, as well as visuals for marketing, real estate, etc. So basically anything property wise we cover. And that sort of spills over into lots of different things. We're dealing with architects, dealing with surveyors, basically the whole build process from the minute a planning application goes in all the way through to when the property is marketed.
Interesting. Okay, so what equipment do you guys use then? And then what does that look like in terms of the actual output that you deliver, the solution that you deliver to your customers?
Okay, so as in terms of drones, quite a mixed bag really. So because we are creating things like aerial time lapses, we're doing drone tours through buildings, through properties, to inspect areas and buildings where people obviously can't necessarily go. And also we are then creating 3D models of construction sites. So when we go, so take a typical site, if we go to a site on a monthly basis, normally most clients will have obviously your standard photography and your aerial video of the site. We'll then create a digital twin. And then we will also create a time lapse from the second visit, etc. So drones that we normally use would be anything sort of starting at the Mini 5 Pro, going up to then a Mavic 3 Enterprise, and then the Mavic 4 Pro as well. Most of the 3D models that we do, in fact, all the 3D models that we do, they're for visual representation only. So we don't really get involved in, millimeter accuracy. That's not I work in collaboration with someone else. If a client wants that, then we're quite happy to pass that business over. Our visuals are all about giving clients a report every time we visited the site, so they can then either have that as an internal record or pass it on to their clients, so they can keep them updated as the site progresses.
Interesting. So it's about, I suppose, then, because of the data that you guys deliver ultimately to your clients as the product that you offer them, it's about having the right tool for the job, right? Because all of those drones have slightly different capabilities and different sensors that capture a different data set.
Yeah, definitely. And also because you're dealing with, when it comes to a construction site, you're dealing with different stages as well. So, and not only that, but it's not just drones that we're using. So we're using 360 cameras as well. We're using ground-based time-lapse cameras, because obviously the fact that we're going to that site and creating a report for the client, more often than not, clients don't just want drone photography or drone videos. They want to, they want to expand that to ground, as I say, ground photography or ground time lapse as well. And different parts of, or different stages, you've got different clients. So, for example, before a site is even before construction starts on a site, you might have a pre-planning report needed for the architect, so they can submit that to or the developer can submit that into planning for planning consent. In which case, normally for that you'd be using the Mavic 3 Enterprise to get some orthomosaics and maybe a 3D model of the site, some 360 visuals. They can submit that in with their planning application. So that will then help the planners visualize what they're looking to build better, rather than just seeing some still images. Then you've got the potential if they're demolishing a building or they're converting a building. Sometimes you've got listed building aspect as well. So we will go along and do an inspection of the building. In fact, we've done one recently, which is a chapel in Kent, and we've had to go along there and create a listed building condition inspection, not survey, which we then pass on to the architect, who then will give that to the planning, the listed part of the planning department, and they want to see that the certain aspects of that building aren't changed during the build. So they're obviously there. You've got things like the stonework, the windows, and parts of the roof that they say have to stay the same during the build process. So we create a report, which is a cloud-based report. The assets can also be downloaded off that report, but it just means that then we can go along at various stages of the build and supply the architect with those visuals, and they can then pass it on to the planning department.
Interesting. So that, and if you don't mind me asking, because I'm sure a lot of people, this is, it's that kind of next level piece. People want to know not just the what, but the how. So what is there a specific platform that you guys use to help you compile all of that data and produce a report from it? Or is it something that you guys, is it a proprietary technique that you guys use that you've developed yourselves?
That's a really good point. So obviously back in the day, and I started in the industry about 8 years ago, and back in the day it was always using things like Pix4D to create 3D models, etc., etc. But and it's a great platform, but things have moved on, and now because if we're talking about 3D models for a second, because a 3D model does serve so many different purposes. You can use it for a roof inspection, you can use it for a building inspection, you can use it for construction progress monitoring. So a couple of years ago, there was I was looking at different platforms other than Pix4D, and I found that there was one that, in fact, it was only I think it was only created a couple of years ago, but I've sort of evolved with it. So we've been using it. We've been helping the company, make changes to it. And it's a company called, I think it's called MYX, and it's a platform called 13D, which is a great platform. From our point of view, it's easy to access, so you can literally embed it into a cloud report. The client can have access to it, they can change it, you can add annotations to it. But if you take a typical example of a construction site, if you scan the site using photogrammetry, you upload the images. So let's say, for example, a standard 3D model that we create is somewhere between 400 to 500 images of that construction site. You can also embed 360 panoramas into that report as well. All goes up into the cloud. Normally within 2 hours, 2 to 3 hours, they create a 3D model. It's overlaid onto a map automatically for you. You can then access it. You can give the client access to it. You can add notes or annotations to it if you wanted to, dates, etc. And then the client can also then share that with their clients or any stakeholders, etc. To actually build the report itself, to embed things like the 13D, or to embed the video content or whatever else we're putting in within that report, the still images. I tend to use Google Sites because it's an easy platform to use, and it's also an easy platform to share, and it's secure. So you can share it specifically with the client and give them access to share it as well. Whereas, as opposed to just sending everything through WeTransfer, it's nice for them
Yeah.
to have and quite often our clients like us to white label the reports. So we'll put their logos on it and everything, and then they can simply send it on to their client. So we're pretty much doing their job for them.
Interesting. Yeah, that's Thank you for sharing that, mate. It's really helpful, I'm sure, for a lot of people because it's one of these like these little trade secrets that people who are being successful, like we people do tend to try and keep them as trade secrets, right? So, and that doesn't help other people to advance. And it's one of those big things for me. If anyone's been listening to my content over the years now, I always say like, there's no point actually trying to compete with other people. It's all about collaborating and co-opetition if you need to, right? But there might be, as you've mentioned, sometimes where you need to bring in a surveyor to qualify or, qualify a data set or whatever it might be. And they might fly drones too or have access to drones. But actually, do you know what? By building those relationships, for me, it makes sense to build those relationships, work
Definitely.
together with someone else, because actually they might also have jobs that they can't facilitate. They specialize in the data side or the qualification of the data. You specialize in the collection of it. Well, they might have something that's too big for them or that's too far away or that they're busy on another day. So they'll give you a call. And actually that then is how you build these business relationships where you stop competing with each other and you start working together. And that helps everybody in the industry. I think it's interesting as well because Pix4D, little story on that, if I may, little kind of sidebar, I suppose. Pix4D, we, when I had aerial motion pictures, this is going back, 15 years if you listen to this live. We're flying model helicopters with cameras on, went on to doing drone stuff. We started doing 3D models and surveys to an extent, and we did have people qualifying the data for us. We set up a company called TerraMap, and we invested £60,000, so it's like 100,000 US dollars, into buying servers and GPU servers that could run Pix4D. So we paid, I think it was something like 14,000 quid, $20,000 for a copy of Pix4D. We spent 60 grand on all this server infrastructure in-house because the cloud didn't exist at the time. You certainly couldn't transfer the amount of data. That was the problem. You couldn't transfer the data, gigabytes at the time. It's probably terabytes now with the number of photos and the quality of the cameras. And we built those models in-house. But one of the biggest problems was how do you deliver that data? Because we had big clients, but we were like, oh, we've built your point cloud. It's like, oh, how do we send it? And we ended up, you had these data sets were so big, and again, no cloud sharing at the time. We were having to put them on hard drives and SSDs and get those hard drives couriered out. So it's amazing now that actually there are alternatives to Pix4D because that creates, a bit of price, hopefully price easing in that market, but all-in-one solutions potentially now that are coming up.
I think so, and I think obviously everything there's different software for different use cases. I get that, and obviously if you're creating or if you need real real time accuracy or absolute accuracy, sorry, rather than relative accuracy, then I get that you need to be using things like ground control points and that sort of stuff, which is why I tend to leave that particular process and those jobs to someone who does that day in, day out. We're more creative. We like to be, we're more on the creative side. But it's interesting, most of the clients that I deal with, construction, whether it's contractors, architects, developers, they love the 3D models, but their use cases for them are purely visual. Unless they're having a boundary, unless they want a boundary survey or whatever, or they've got they need something accurate for the architects to actually put the planning application in. Most of the time, it is more from a visual perspective. So, something like 1.3D, to give an idea, if it's okay for me to talk about differences in cost,
Yeah, please do.
Not sponsored, but I've been using their software now for about, as I say, about 2 years, and I think their base rate is about 20 quid a month. And that's unlimited. That's unlimited models. So, when I remember when I was using Pix4D back in the day, or other companies like that, and I think the charges were, I think I was paying out sort of £400-500 a month in some instances. It was incredibly expensive. So it's great for drone pilots like me that are running businesses, that you have got all these other companies coming to the fore because the technology is moving on so quickly. And I think splatting now is becoming more and more popular as well. I've Gaussian splatting, I've used that on occasions, but for what I need, I don't think it's quite there yet. I think it's still got a little bit of evolving to do before I can build it into my deliverables. Um, but yeah, no, as I say, if you know, with regards to 3D models, I think it's a great platform to try if anyone wants to give it a go. And I think they do a free trial as well.
Nice. I might even give that a go myself, to be honest, and just have a play around with it, just to start seeing what the different options are that are out there, so I can help people better moving forwards. Okay, so here's a question then. So you know, specialising in the kind of construction industry and that side of things, how how did you start to build those relationships and generate those leads in that space? Because it is a space that a lot of people want to penetrate, because it is, if I'm being brutally honest, it's one of those spaces where there is generally a budget, um, you know, that they're able to spend on marketing, and they have to get these data sets basically. So it is a potentially a lucrative market, I would suggest. But how do you get an into that market? How did you manage to do that? Is there a super secret way? Did you have contacts in there already? What did that look like for you?
Okay, so spoiler alert, I was in the property industry for about 30 years prior to opening a drone business. I fell into the drone business by accident. So I had a property business where we sourced land for clients, we sold new builds, and then about 8 years ago, a client came to me and said, "I want some drone shots," because at the time, 8, 9 years ago, it was still quite well, it was a very new thing, and I tried to source a drone pilot to come in and do the work. I know I was actually amazed at what they were looking to charge the client. I then thought, well, okay. In actual fact, I couldn't book anybody. I couldn't get anybody for the client for the job that the client wanted to do. So I then decided to put myself on the course. Sorry, I'm digressing now, but just to give I put myself on the course. I passed the PFCO, and then gradually fell into doing more and more drone jobs, fell out of love with the property industry, had my own estate agency. I think at one point there was 16 members of staff, decided that, that was something after nearly 30 years at that point, I really didn't want to do that anymore. And thankfully for me, more and more clients are asking me to do drone jobs because, it was then becoming a thing 6, 7, 8 years ago. So I fell into it. I managed to retain all of the clients that I had in the new business. So I offered them the service, whether it was just taking aerial shots of their properties or their construction sites, and then that obviously evolved from there. That said, I think that where I because I had that in, and I knew where the potential, I suppose, of construction or property. Um, Potential as in knowing that there's a start point and an end point. The start point is the planning process, where you've got architects through to obviously the clients as well, putting your planning applications in, all the way through to the build process, where you've got lots of different cogs, as in you've got developers, architects, contractors, you've got roofers, you've got grounds workers, etc., etc. And 9 times out of 10 on a construction site, these are all different companies. They're not normally, unless you're dealing with one of the real big developers. A lot of people, their clients, they subcontract out. So the beauty there is that an opportunity for someone like myself as a drone pilot is that all of these different um, parts in that construction, all of these different clients, they all want some visuals normally, whether it's for their website, whether it's for case studies, whether it's for to keep a track of their own work that they're doing. The roofers, the electricians, the contractors, etc., the grounds people, and that then leads all the way through to then the eventual marketing of the properties. If we're talking about new build homes, where you've got the developers, you've then got the agents who are going to be marketing the properties. So when you actually look at that whole process, there's so many opportunities within the sort of the starting planning application all the way through to the marketing of the properties. And I think that if you build a relationship with architects, then you're going to get your leads from that. So when I first started out, and even now, to be honest with you, as an intro, if there's an architect, if there's a construction site that I want to get into, I'll go right back to who the architects were, because I can perhaps say to them, look, I want to get involved with this site. I want to get involved with this client. If it's not a client that's known to me, how about you give me an introduction? I'll do some visuals. I'll do some visuals for that client, eventually wanting to charge that client, and I'll give you those visuals for free or at a discounted
Interesting.
price. And even on the construction side, if you get in there, because you've got normally 5 or 6 different companies that were going to want those visuals, you can either, be greedy and charge them all a fee, a good fee, or you can, if they're all communicating with each other, you can say, look, guys, you all want the visuals here. How about I do a bespoke report for each one of you, and you'll split the cost? Because that way you're going to get visuals for every single part, uh, every single time we go back to the site, you're going to get visuals that you want. We can then um, divide them up into 4 or 5 different reports. And from my point of view, a construction site normally, I think on average, I would say we go back about 13, 14 times, because a build process is normally 12 to 18 months. So in that time, whether it's monthly or bi-monthly, you're going back normally a minimum of 6 or 7 times, and sometimes it's as many as 20 times to a site. So when you look at it that way, even if you're averaging £500 per visit, you can start to build a nice healthy pipeline. You've only got to have 4 or 5 construction sites a month for different clients you're going back to, and that's a healthy pipeline to be building.
It really is, isn't it? So that actually then all of a sudden becomes quite an interesting place to go prospecting if you are looking at getting into this space, or if you're in the space already and you're looking for a more consistent revenue stream, I suppose, or revenue streams. This might be one place to look, because so just on that then, if you end up going, say you end up going back 10 times to a specific project and you charge £500 per time, so $750 ish if you're in around the world, do you charge per time that you go, or do you charge upfront? And you say, right, we reckon we'll end up coming back 10 times, so it's going to be £5,000 as an upfront fee, or do you charge on a every time you go out and deliver a report? How does that work?
Yeah, so I've got a couple of clients that I work on a retainer with. So because I go to a number of sites with them per month, so they put me on a retainer for each month, because it's consistent, and I've been working with them now for about 3 years. But the majority of clients want to pay you per visit. So I normally come up with a package and say, look, if it's a monthly visit, obviously it's cheaper than me going back bi-monthly, to encourage them to ask me to go back every month rather
Yeah.
than bi-monthly. And then they're getting a data set every 4 to 6 or 4 to 5 weeks. And some clients, it's more than monthly, because obviously you've got, for example, if you've got a client that's doing a demolition job. So sometimes I've got 2 or 3 clients that do demo work. That happens quite quickly, and they want the data sets. You go back after 2 months, and the job's all done. So normally, I mean, that I've even done I think sort of visits every 3 or 4 days sometimes for those clients. So as I say, normally you're looking at a minimum of 6 to 7 visits, no matter what the site is, and that's normally for the contractor. And then what I would suggest is that, if I tend to sit down with the client at the outset and say, right, what's the program? Okay. They'll give me an idea of what the program is. I'll then say, okay, well, based on this program, obviously things change with weather, etc. I would suggest that you want visits on these dates. Because I know, for example, it could be that they've got crane work happening on a certain day, or they've got stuff being delivered and they want that filmed. So I'll there to sit down and actually work out on the program, because that also gives me more opportunities. So normally, again, if it's crane stuff being delivered, or timber frames being delivered, let's say, with a crane on a construction site, I can then contact, and I have done this because I've got one of my best clients actually from doing this. I then contacted with the client's permission, I said, look, do you mind if I make contact with the timber frame company? Because I can then speak to them, film their timber frames being craned in. Maybe you can then split the costs with them on that visit as well. And that's then led me to then gaining the timber frame company as another client. And then hopefully they'll like the work, which they did. And then we move on to other sites with them as well. So by
Nice.
getting the knowledge of what's happening on the program, hopefully you can then tap into more clients as well.
See, and I think that is one of those things that a lot of people don't potentially think about, particularly when you're first starting out, right? Is how important it is to realize that you're not just a drone guy, drone girl. You're not just going out and doing the drone piece. I mean, as you do in lots of cases, we talk to people about they do ground stuff as well, 360 work, all sorts of different things. But actually, even deeper than that, it's about understanding where your piece of the puzzle fits in, and what your solution, which is the thing I talk about, the thing that solves a pain point for someone, fits into the overall picture. And in things like that, that's absolutely genius, right? Because it then starts to look like a set of tree branches, I suppose, in terms of opportunities, because you've got the trunk in the middle, which is the initial job, but there might be 4 or 5 other people that you could help with a solution or a data set, and then they might have 4 or 5 other people, and all of a sudden you've got a solid potential pipeline of work, if not a pipeline of work, a network of leads that you can then start to talk to and work with, send a Christmas card to, connect on LinkedIn, all that sort of stuff. And
Potential's
it
endless,
can
because
grow quite quickly.
what I found as well, Matt, is that which I've been doing more and more recently, is that some clients want different things that that you never would have thought of doing for other clients, if that makes sense. So to give you an example, I've got a client that I probably do, I think, 4 sites for them each month. And I've been working for them for the last couple of years. They've asked me to do visuals for their website and other odds and sods as well. And they had and again, it was a problem and they wanted a solution to it. And they said, "Can you help?" And they had a site in Tunbridge Wells, in the middle of Tunbridge Wells, and they're looking to demolish a building and put in a planning application. They said the planners wanted somehow to visualise and it was either going to be an 11-story building or a 17-story building. And the architects wanted something to hand to the planners so they could say, this is the view from 11 stories and this is a view from 17 stories. But rather than just coming up and saying, here's some still images of those heights, we said, well, what about we'll create a virtual tour. We'll do 4 points around the existing building and where it's going to be. Where the existing building is now, we'll do 4 panoramas at each point, 11 stories and then 17 stories. And then we'll build that into a virtual tour so that you could literally just open it up and the planners could say, right, okay, so I'm now at 11 stories on that corner. So it's placed over a map of the area. At that corner, this is what the view would be like. Go to that corner rather than just have still images. Like a pan around, look around. And, and it was so well received by the planners that, we've now offered that to other clients to say, look, this solved a solution. This solved a solution for a problem that one of our clients had. And I've already had 2 or 3 other clients say, well, actually, that's a really good idea. We've got something slightly different, but that method might work for this as well. Can you give us a price for that? And it's not, it's just something totally different. But I think my point is that if you do something for a client, it's to making sure that you're offering that to all your other clients as well, because they may not even know that you do it.
Yeah. Now, again, it's a really astute, observation, I suppose, and a clever way to add in complementary services to what you're already doing. It's not like you're actually creating new solutions or new ways of working. It's actually something else that you can add in, and all of these things together. I talk again about creating offers, and we've got videos coming and workshops coming on how to build and create an offer, because that's ultimately what someone buys. And actually, if you can add all of these additional services in, or potentially take them out, if someone can't afford the golden tuxedo, the full package, actually, okay, cool. Well, you know what? We'll come, and if you can't afford the £1,500 offer, then we do one that's 1,000, but you lose out on the panoramas for visualization. You lose out on the white labeling of the report, etc., and that is what it is. And yeah, it's really a really
It's a really
interesting way
good
of doing
point,
it.
because I don't want to make it sound like I'm getting £1,000 for every job, because I'm not. So our base rate for construction sites visits starts at 299. And then then basically from there, which is your basic, I say basic, it sounds terrible, which is your aerial photography and some video work. Okay. But then once you've got the client agreeing to that, it's not an extortionate amount of money, £299. It's still worth going out there. I mean, you're on site probably, and I think, everybody knows that in our industry, that the site work you do is probably only 20% of the job. The other 80% is the editing and putting it all together and delivering it to the client. But once you're out there, and again, this is something that I do I don't think I've ever gone to a site where someone's booked a £299 job and just given them on their first visit the £299 package. I'll go there, maybe do a £499 job and say, there's your £299 package. By the way, I've put that in as an extra. If you want that on the next visit, it will be this much. So it's an easy way to upsell for the next visit, because if they like the work, they're definitely going to get you to come back. I don't think, touch wood, I don't think I've had any clients yet that have got us in for the first visit that haven't booked us for consecutive visits afterwards.
Nice. That's what we
Thankfully,
want.
touch wood.
Yeah. See, and that's the other thing, right? Like, these are all classic, simple, when you think about it, business techniques that are used all over the world. We're all exposed to them all day, every day. But I think, again, because so many people come into this industry who don't potentially have that business background, or that that you're not been made aware of what you're being subjected to all the time, because why would you be, right? You don't know what you don't know. So it's not on you if you're listening and you're like, oh, I didn't realize that. That's the point. That's why we're having these conversations. That's why we're being as open and honest with each other as we can all the time, to let you know what it is you need to do. Because when you think about it, you go to a restaurant, right? And you go into the restaurant, you choose a restaurant a lot of the time based on where it is and how expensive it is. If you're going out for a posh birthday meal, you go to the expensive restaurant once a year, right? But if you go to a different restaurant, most of the time, it is what it is. But you go to the restaurant for the food, but actually they don't make much margin potentially on the food. What they make the margin on is the drinks. So the first thing they do is sell you a drink, and then sell you another drink, and they'll keep coming back and asking if you want more and more, because that adds on, if you're in the UK, £3-4 a time at 80% margin or whatever it is, when they put in the sugar syrup in your glass of Coca-Cola and filling it up with soda water, and all of a sudden we're looking at, okay, that's really interesting. McDonald's built an empire on that concept, where it's like, would you like fries with that?
Yes.
Because the fries are an extra $1, they're an extra £1, but it costs them very little to do, and they've already acquired you as a customer because you're there. So it's a really interesting concept in terms of, is it worth potentially, particularly if you're going into an industry like you're working in with drones, having a bronze package, right? Let's not call it a basic package. We have a bronze package, which is this, but then you've got the gold and the platinum package as well. I wouldn't call it that if I was working in your industry, I'm just saying, right? But you have these extra add-ons, these bolt-on services that you can provide. And actually, as you said, and it's a really good point, especially if it's a first engagement, if you've got the capacity and the bandwidth to do it, get in through the door and use that basic package as the hook. And if the client asks them if they can afford the other bits and pieces, maybe, if it's, like I say, if you've got the bandwidth, why not do a couple of the optional extras and offer that to them on a complimentary basis for the first time? Because, as you said, the next time they get you back, they're probably going to 9 times out of 10 say, yeah, actually, I really liked those panoramas. Let's add that on this time, because that's invaluable.
Normally take one, Matt. Normally, if you do two or three, like you say, two or three add-ons, they'll normally take at least one of those, because clients are obviously, I can go and sit down with a client and show them other sites and say, oh, look, we can do this, we can do that. But until they see something that's their own visualized, once they see their own stuff, then they think, oh, actually, I really like that. It's the same with developers. If you go to a developer and you say, I can, film your brand new properties that you're building, If I went and sat down with a developer and said, here's some I did for your competitor down the road, they're not really interested. They don't give a toss about that. If you go and say, look, you've got 10 units there, I'd love to film them all. I'll tell you what, let me go and film one completely free of charge for you. There's no cost. I'll go and film it. If you don't like it, you haven't got to pay for it. You can have all the data. You can have the visuals. Again, once they see it themselves, do a good job, obviously. Once they see it themselves, it's their own product. You know, they're looking at it thinking, I really like that. I want all of them done. You know, so I think, you know, when you've got an opportunity as we have, because we're filming things at the end of the day, we're taking pictures and we're doing visual stuff. Companies that want what we're doing are paying money for that. So we've got an opportunity to produce our own marketing material. So if you're doing, especially when you're setting out, which is something that I didn't do enough of, and I would strongly recommend that guys that coming into the industry go and get your portfolio built. You know, if you want to go into the construction industry or whatever industry you want to go into with drones, if you want to film, you know, FPV stuff or whatever, get your portfolio together. You know, there's no shame in thinking, right, okay, I need a restaurant, I need a hotel, I need a commercial premises, I need that. I'm going to go and do all of those. The first ones I'm going to do it free because I just want that in my portfolio. I still do it now. I mean, I'm trying to get into more and more FPV stuff now. FPV's probably added about 20% to my income in the last 12 months. You know, I'm not an
Okay,
FPV
nice.
pilot. I fly in a Vata 2, you know, and I fly it in sport or normal mode. I don't fly it in manual mode, but it's added an unbelievable amount of extra income um, to my business on a monthly basis, whether it's construction or real estate. You don't need to fly and I take my hat off to the, you know, to the FPV guys. What they do is incredible. But in my industry, you don't need to fly in manual mode. You can still create really good content by flying in normal or sports mode.
Yeah,
Um,
absolutely.
you know, and I think anybody coming into this side of it, construction or property, you have to invest in an FPV drone without a shadow of
Okay,
a doubt.
interesting. Okay. Because more and more clients are wanting that, right? Because everyone's starting to see it.
It's the dynamic aspect of it. You know, you can take some nice drone shots with your cinematic drone or you create your 3D models. But again, the minute you sit a client down and they see, you know, I mean, what's popular at the moment is actually doing a fly around the site, actually getting some really nice shots of the guys working, making sure that it keeps them on their toes, make sure they've got all their PPE on, of course.
Yeah.
You know, getting some really good close-up shots and action shots for the clients' websites. They love that. They love it on construction sites. And you know, I've definitely won more business since I've been showcasing the FPV stuff than just showing some aerial time lapses or, you know, some 3D models, because it's a much more dynamic thing to look at, and it gives them another thing for their social media content as well.
Interesting. So I've got two questions from that then. So you just mentioned, and I'll do the second one first, if you like. You just mentioned there, you're getting way more interest and potentially kind of lead generation and conversation started by showcasing your work. Where do you find that showcasing your work, what's the most efficient kind of route to exposing your work to your ideal clients and generating those leads?
Really good question, and I've got to be completely honest here and say I don't do enough of it. But certainly, you know, with clients' permission, I will showcase my work on social media sites like LinkedIn, Facebook, a little bit of TikTok. But where I have done quite a lot of email marketing and got some work from that is, for example, if I've got a client who has instantly put something on their own website. So I did a school a little while back, and we created they wanted the drone tour of their school. So we thought, rather than just do a drone tour for their social media, we created an interactive platform. So their website would pop open. You would then be looking down on their school, and they'd have things like they had a secret garden, they had the classrooms, they had an allotment. So you could click on one of those areas, and it would then do the FPV tour just of that area. So if someone was looking to send their children to that school, or even for the kids in the school itself, it was a nice way of them actually having an interactive platform to them to look at different aspects of the school. So I then shared that with loads of other companies and loads of other schools because it was already on their website. So they didn't mind me sharing it to say, look, we've created this. And I got 5 or 6 jobs from that, not just from schools, but from other people. I've got a sports centre on there. So again, we created a similar platform for a sports centre. So I think, again, it's just a case of making things slightly different. But then once you've got the clients then using that material, marketing it, to then, if you're sharing not just my website, if I'm sharing it saying, look what our clients, how they're using the visuals that we created for them, how they're using it, and sending that on to other companies, their competitors as well. Hopefully, that's a case of getting more business that way.
Yeah, it's really interesting. Thank you for sharing that. Like, it's one of the techniques that I use effectively. And again, all of this is about being transparent, right? Like, when I get someone on the podcast, for example, you and I connected through LinkedIn initially. You've come on the podcast now. I will this afternoon, pretty much as soon as we close down the recording of the podcast, I will pop on my LinkedIn a post showing us, excited to have done the podcast today, and I will tag you and your business in it, because then it promotes the podcast and me to all of your audience and vice versa. And I think it's one of those, I see so many people coming in, and this is the other question really, was about how would you suggest that someone starts to build a portfolio in this space. But this is one of the big things that I speak to most of my coaching clients about when I talk to them. And it's like, you've just got to get out there and start doing stuff. Like, stop thinking about your website, stop thinking about your logo, stop thinking about lead gen, stop thinking about what do I need a telephone number on my website. You've got no one looking at your website yet, so it doesn't matter. What you've got to do is get out there and start to practice what it is that you want to be doing. And then tagging all of the people in the practice that you do. So James Singleton, we had him on the first episode of the podcast. Actually, he's a coaching client of mine of old. We've worked together for a long time now. He's full-time FPV, makes a very good living at it, and
lovely stuff is right.
Yeah, his stuff is incredible, right? Because he puts the time in and practices. But when he first started out, he did exactly what we said, which was go out and practice. When you're practicing, go and do it deliberately. Don't just go out and wazz around your drone in a field. Go out and do it as if you were doing work for a client. And when you do, make sure that you tag the leisure centre that you've flown around the outside of in your LinkedIn post, on TikTok and on Instagram. Go and, he's based in Reading in the UK, so South Central UK. And he tagged the big construction companies that had the cranes up at the time and things like that. He tagged the big buildings in Reading and the businesses that were in there, and that exploded his growth and his lead gen, and that was how he got started. Is there any specific way you would suggest in terms of wanting to build a portfolio in this space that people could go out and do that? Effectively on a complimentary basis at first, because you're potentially not going to be able to charge anyone because you're not delivering anything.
Yeah, definitely. And again, I'll go back to, the starting process of, it's easy for me to say this because I was in the property industry for so long, but if you look at how many cogs there are, I suppose, in that process of from when a planning application goes in to then properties being built, and then when they're actually on the market, there's lots of different cogs in there, and where it really starts from the planning process. So get on board with some architects, go and see some architects and say, look, have you got any sites that you want me to, you want some aerial visuals of? I won't charge you anything, that maybe, that I can help you send some, you can use those visuals then to help you with your planning applications for different clients. And maybe then all I would ask for is an introduction to them clients, and then I can then, like I said earlier, I've still got, I call it working in collaboration with them really, but I've still got some architects now that some of them I charge. Clearly I charge for the work. Others have given me lots of work over the years. So I'll give them complimentary stuff, because when they pass me a client, that's a paid client. So then why would I not give them some complimentary visuals? So there's definitely the architect side of it. There's nothing wrong. Again, this is my opinion. I've done this in the past. Go and shoot a construction site. You don't even, it's there. You can go and stand on the side of, fly legally, but stand on the side of the road with your mini drone, take some visuals, edit some stills, take some, or even if you've got any construction that's happening near you, go and fly a waypoint mission, do a construction time lapse. That always impresses clients. If you've got a construction site just starting now, go and film it. After 6 months, send it to the client. So I've just filmed this of your construction site. Would you consider me for your next site? You're not just doing, people sometimes say, I wouldn't do free work. Well, you're not really doing free work because you're creating your own portfolio at the same time. So, if you can see that from the side of the road, there's nothing wrong with you filming it. There's no law that you can't film that. So, go and film it. You've got it for your portfolio. Hopefully you can then use it as an example to send that client and other clients to say, look, I've just filmed this, so build your portfolio up that way. That's I would recommend definitely getting out there. And like the other guys that have been on your show have said, don't keep talking about it. Don't keep talking about, oh, I've just bought this new drone. Our company used the best and the newest technology. Go out and film stuff and send it to clients. That's the way you're going to win the work.
That is, for me, the biggest takeaway we can give to anybody, not just kind of in terms of this episode of the show, but in general, right? If you've got into the drone space because you want to fly a drone, get out and fly the damn drone. Stop thinking about how you're going to do X, Y, and Z in the future, or how much you're going to charge people and all that sort of stuff. Until you're getting jobs coming into you and that becomes a problem. And yes, you need to think about these things a little bit in advance, that you can set up your ideal client and you can do the journey for them. And I get all of that. I'm not saying that you can be negligent in that respect. What I'm saying is, before that happens, before you've got your website, before you've thought about how you're going to, bring money in, get out there and fly and start tagging people. Dig your well now before you're thirsty. Right? If you're listening to this live, it's exactly what we're doing here at Drone Business Network. Like, we don't have a product or a kind of monetization route at the moment. We've got a plan. We know what we're going to do. But right now, it's about digging the well, because we want to get 1,000, 5,000, 10,000 people engaging with the content. We want to be helping all of these people so that when we do eventually launch something, we've got a pool of the right people primed and ready to go. And it's the same for you now. If you're thinking about getting into drones, if you're struggling, think about how you're spending your time and use that time wisely. Get out there and do, if you're not being paid by someone to do stuff, get out there and do what it is that you want to do. Keep it for yourself and your own portfolio, but tag the people in it that you would want to be working with and the number of people I speak to who do that, and then the company that they wanted to work with anyway reaches out to them because they've been tagged and goes, oh, is there any way we could license that footage? Yes, there is.
Exactly that. Like I say, that apart from the weather in this country, there's nothing stopping you going out, even if you're doing this part time. Even if you're, doing it to the point where, you're literally just grabbing an hour at a weekend, because you've got a bit of spare time. Don't, like you said, don't go and practice in a park somewhere. Of course, you need to practice flying a drone, but let's be honest, if you're flying something like a DJI drone nowadays, they're not difficult to get in the air and start taking some pictures. And there's enough YouTube channels out there to show you what settings to use and how to fly drones. You can sit down probably in an evening and learn all of that if that's what you want to do. But any spare time you've got, if you're building a drone, don't use stock footage. I've seen it so many times before. And the laughable thing is, I've recently seen it on about 3 different people's sites where they're using the same stock footage, and you think, who filmed it? You don't need to do that.
It's the quickest way to lose credibility, I think.
On your website.
Yeah, it's a really quick way to lose credibility in the, is if you use stock footage and it's clearly stock footage, and actually then you're not able to deliver potentially what it is that your people have come to you from. So get out there and practice, guys. That's why we get into the drone space. That's why we wanted to have these drone businesses ultimately, so we can be out on the road or picking our own times that we want to be out there and working with the people we want to work with, doing the work we want to do. Paul, It's been absolutely fascinating having you on, mate. Thank you for sharing your insights and for being so candid, really. Like that's what we need in the industry, in my opinion. That's why we're trying to build these networks and connect all these people so that, as we said at the start, people 5 years behind you, potentially in this case, are able to get those little nuggets, those little insights, and accelerate their growth and thrive in what is an exciting industry, an exciting place to be. I will drop all of your links. If you're listening on Spotify, I'll drop them down in the show notes. If you're watching on YouTube, I'll drop the links to Paul's LinkedIn, his YouTube channel, where he does a lot of showcasing of his work and has videos about how to start and build a successful drone business as well. So go and check that out. Thank you ever so much for joining us, mate. It's been a pleasure.
Thanks,
I've been Matt Williams. That's Paul Brown from 123 Drone. This is the Drone Business Show. Until the next time, fly safe and blue skies.